A mother of three vanishes without a trace, her phone, wallet, and car untouched. The next day, her husband adjusts the security cameras, and when questioned, he insists she's just locked in a room. But the room is empty. Maya Milete had everything to live for: a successful Navy career, 3 children, and plans to leave her controlling marriage. But the call she made to a divorce attorney on January 7th, 2021, may have sealed her fate. What really happened to Maya Millet, and why is her husband at the center of the mystery? Let's uncover the shocking truth. What would make a family break down a bedroom door only to find nothing but emptiness where a mother of 3 should be? A terrifying moment that would change their lives forever. On January 9th, 2021, Maya Millet's family arrived at her Chula Vista home with growing unease. For over 24 hours, her husband Larry had been telling them that Maya was locked in their bedroom, refusing to come out. The story seemed odd from the beginning. Maya missing her own daughter's 11th birthday celebration was completely out of character for the devoted mother. "We were worried about her," Maya's sister Maricris Druaye would later recall. "Larry kept saying she was just in the room, locked herself in. But it didn't make sense. Maya would never miss her daughter's birthday, no matter what was happening." The family's concern escalated when they noticed contradictions in Larry's behavior. While claiming Maya had isolated herself in their locked bedroom for more than a day, he simultaneously possessed the very key that could open the door. This puzzling detail raised immediate red flags among Maya's relatives. It was strange, Maya's brother-in-law Richard Druaye later testified. One minute Larry's saying nobody can get to Maya because she locked herself in. The next, he's pulling a key from his pocket like it was nothing. If he had the key all along, why was Maya supposedly unreachable? When the family finally convinced Larry to open the bedroom door, the scene before them confirmed their worst fears. The room stood empty. No Maya. Just neatly arranged pillows under a blanket, arranged to give the impression someone was sleeping there. The charade unraveled instantly. Even more troubling was what they did find in the home. Maya's personal belongings remained untouched. Her cell phone, wallet, identification, and car were all present. Nothing a person would willingly leave behind if they were planning to go anywhere. The family stood bewildered in the empty bedroom, trying to process what they were seeing while Larry offered shifting explanations. First, he said she might have gone for a walk, Maya's father would later tell investigators. Then maybe she went hiking. Then he suggested she could have gone to visit a friend, but nothing made sense. Her purse was still there. Her car was in the garage. Where would she go without any of those things? As tension filled the house, Maya's father confronted Larry directly about the bedroom key. During later court testimony, he described how Larry had reached into his pocket and produced the key despite his earlier claims. He said only Maya had access to the room, Maya's father recounted, but there he was with the key right in his pocket the whole time. The family's concern transformed into outright alarm as they pieced together the inconsistencies. Larry's demeanor shifted between casual dismissal and nervous agitation. When questioned more intensely, he became defensive, suggesting Maya was probably just cooling off somewhere after what he described as a minor argument. Maya's sister Maricris noticed other troubling details. The house seemed unusually tidy, almost staged. Larry appeared to have rehearsed his responses. Most disturbingly, the children seemed confused by the adults' concern, with the oldest asking innocently, "Where is Mommy?" Daddy said she was sleeping. As hours passed with no sign of Maya and no plausible explanation from Larry, the family's suspicions deepened. This wasn't a temporary absence or a misunderstanding. Something was seriously wrong. Maya was a responsible woman with a stable job at the Navy base, 3 children she adored, and no history of disappearing. The empty room represented something far more sinister than a simple absence. "We knew something terrible had happened," Maracris would later tell reporters. "Maya would never leave her children. Never. There was no scenario where she would just vanish voluntarily without telling anyone, especially not her kids." After hours of escalating concern and conflicting stories from Larry, the family made the decision that would officially begin the search for Maya. On that same day, January 9th, 2021, Marie-Claire Drouillet filed a missing persons report with the Chula Vista Police Department. The report described the unusual circumstances of Maya's disappearance, the contradictions in Larry's statements, and the family's growing fears that Maya might be in danger. The filing of that report transformed a confusing family situation into an official investigation. Police officers arrived at the Millet home that evening, taking initial statements and beginning what would become one of the most extensive missing persons investigations in the region's history. What struck officers immediately was the strange calm with which Larry described his wife's absence. While Maya's family wept openly and paced anxiously, Larry appeared detached, offering vague theories about where Maya might have gone while emphasizing that she just needed space and would come back when she was ready. The officers' initial search revealed no signs of a struggle in the home, but they noted the items left behind that contradicted any theory of voluntary departure. A woman's purse sat on a counter, keys hung in their usual spot, and Maya's phone, her constant connection to her children and family, remained plugged in beside the bed. In the days that followed, investigators would learn more about the tension that had been building in the Milete household. Friends and family revealed that Maya had been unhappy in her marriage and had recently taken steps toward divorce. But on that first night, as officers documented the scene of the empty bedroom, they could only record the basic facts of a disappearance that made no sense. The bedroom, which should have contained a sleeping mother, held only questions. The pillows arranged under the blanket suggested an attempt to deceive, to create the impression Maya was still there when she wasn't. It was this detail, perhaps more than any other, that convinced Maya's family that whatever had happened to her was not by her own choice. The missing persons report filed by Maracris on January 9th would be just the beginning. In the coming days, weeks, and months, the search for Maya would expand from that empty bedroom to encompass mountains, deserts, and remote areas throughout Southern California. But it all began with that haunting moment. A family standing in the doorway of an empty room where a mother should have been, realizing with growing horror that something was terribly wrong. Behind the mystery of the empty bedroom lay the story of a woman whose life had split into 2 contradictory worlds. By day, Maya excelled as a respected contract specialist at the Naval Information Warfare Center, her colleagues never suspecting the darkness growing at home. Her ability to compartmentalize these worlds would become a crucial element in understanding her disappearance. Maya's roots stretched across the Pacific. Born in the Philippines and raised in the lush landscapes of Honolulu, Hawaii, she carried her island heritage with her throughout life. After graduating from Admiral Arthur W. Radford High School, she pursued higher education at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, building the foundation for her future career. These early chapters of her life painted a picture of determination and ambition, qualities that would define her professional journey. It was in these formative high school years that Maya's path crossed with Larry Millett's. Their meeting came after Larry had relocated to Hawaii from San Diego, a move prompted by his troubling past involving a juvenile gang-related assault arrest. Despite this warning sign, their high school romance blossomed into what would become a decades-long relationship. The sweet beginnings gave no hint of the troubling end that awaited them. As Maya built her career with the Navy, she developed a reputation for excellence. Her colleagues consistently described her as dedicated and responsible, someone who approached her work with unwavering commitment and precision. Her position at the Naval Information Warfare Center represented significant achievement, a 15-year career trajectory that demonstrated her professional capabilities and work ethic. Maya was deeply committed to her 3 children, recalled one colleague, highlighting how she masterfully balanced her demanding professional responsibilities with the needs of her family. This balancing act became increasingly difficult as tensions at home escalated, yet to those around her at work, Maya never let the strain show. Perhaps most remarkable was Maya's ability to maintain 2 separate existences. As her home life deteriorated into what her brother would later describe as a toxic and mentally abusive environment, Maya continued to perform at the highest level professionally. She arrived at work each day, engaged with colleagues, completed complex contract work, and maintained her composure, all while privately dealing with Larry's increasingly controlling behavior. This compartmentalization served as both protection and prison. It allowed Maya to preserve a space where she maintained autonomy and respect, yet it also isolated her growing fear from those who might have offered support sooner. Few outside her immediate family circle recognized the warning signs as they emerged. Her successful career represented more than just professional achievement. It symbolized stability and independence in a home environment where both were increasingly threatened. The regular paycheck she earned provided financial security for her children, while her workplace offered an escape from the mounting tensions at home. These factors would take on greater significance as Maya's marriage continued to crumble, and she began contemplating a permanent separation. As Maya confided to her brother about her fears regarding Larry's behavior, she was simultaneously taking concrete steps toward reclaiming her independence. Friends noted that in the months before her disappearance, Maya had begun exploring the formal steps necessary to separate from Larry. This quiet determination to forge a new path revealed her inner strength, even as external pressures mounted. The professional accomplishments Maya had accumulated over her 15-year career stood in sharp contrast to her troubled home situation. Outside the walls of her house, she was respected, valued, and empowered. Inside those same walls, according to her brother's testimony, she faced a partner who monitored her activities, controlled her movements, and created an atmosphere of fear. These 2 contradictory worlds couldn't coexist indefinitely. As Maya's concerns for her safety grew, the professional stability she had built became both a lifeline and a target. Her career success represented the very independence that Larry seemed desperate to undermine, creating a dangerous tension that would ultimately reach a breaking point. The Maya that her colleagues knew, confident, capable, and committed, seemed worlds apart from the increasingly frightened woman described in her text messages to family members. This stark contrast between her professional and personal realities would become a crucial element for investigators trying to piece together what happened on that January day. For a woman who had built such a structured and successful career, the idea of simply walking away from her children, her responsibilities, and her carefully constructed life made no sense to those who knew her. Her disappearance represented a violent interruption to the life she had built with meticulous care over decades, a disruption completely at odds with everything that defined her. As investigators would soon discover, beneath the surface of Maya's exemplary career, troubling changes were occurring in her home life. The same determination that had helped her build her professional success was now being directed toward a new goal: escaping an increasingly dangerous marriage before it was too late. The determination Maya showed in planning her escape was matched only by Larry's growing obsession with controlling her life. As their once private marital troubles spilled into family gatherings in late 2020, relatives witnessed a disturbing transformation in Larry, from devoted husband to digital stalker, monitoring Maya's every move, message, and financial transaction. 20 years of marriage had weathered many storms, but this was different. What had begun as high school romance in Hawaii had produced 3 children and countless memories. Yet, by the final months of 2020, something fundamentally changed in the dynamic between Maya and Larry. The relationship that once represented stability had become a prison of surveillance and suspicion. December 2020 marked a critical turning point. Maya had silently resolved to divorce Larry, taking concrete steps towards separation that would later prove pivotal to understanding the case. What pushed a woman who had committed 2 decades of her life to this relationship to finally say enough? The answer lay in a pattern of behavior that had become increasingly unbearable, toxic, and mentally abusive. These weren't the words of an outsider or investigator, but Maya's own description of her husband in text messages to her brother. The digital breadcrumbs she left behind painted a portrait of escalating control. Where most couples keep their disagreements private, Maya had begun reaching out to family members, a significant departure from her usual approach to marital problems. The catalyst appeared to be Larry's growing paranoia about infidelity. What began as occasional jealousy morphed into an obsession with tracking Maya's communications. Her emails weren't private, her text messages weren't secure, her social media accounts were under constant scrutiny. Even her financial transactions became objects of Larry's inspection. The ordinary boundaries most people take for granted had disintegrated in their home. The effects of this surveillance were profound. "I've stopped being friends with any guys," Maya confided to her brother in one revealing message. This simple sentence spoke volumes about the psychological impact of Larry's jealousy. Maya, a successful professional who interacted with colleagues of all genders in her Navy contract position, had begun systematically cutting ties with male friends to appease her husband's unfounded suspicions. The social isolation was a textbook warning sign of controlling relationships, cutting victims off from potential support networks. Meanwhile, Larry's own behavior showed increasing desperation. Genesis Tabalanza, Maya's sister-in-law, noticed a sharp increase in Larry's outreach to family members. Where he had previously maintained privacy regarding their relationship, he now frequently sought advice about saving his marriage. These weren't casual conversations, but frantic appeals that revealed his growing anxiety as he sensed Maya slipping away. Family gatherings in late 2020 became stages for this unfolding drama. The tension between Maya and Larry, once carefully hidden behind closed doors, became painfully obvious to relatives. Maya's father reported receiving more calls from Larry than ever before, an unusual pattern that signaled trouble. The facade of marital harmony had cracked, exposing the dysfunction beneath. What makes these warning signs particularly significant is how they escalated alongside Maya's growing determination to leave. As she took concrete steps toward independence, Larry's controlling behaviors intensified proportionally. It wasn't merely coincidental timing, it represented the dangerous period when controlling partners often become most desperate and potentially dangerous. One text message from Maya to her brother encapsulated the surveillance operation her home had become. Larry was regularly monitoring her emails, messages, social media, and financial activity, creating an environment where privacy had ceased to exist. This wasn't occasional snooping, but a comprehensive system of control that left Maya feeling trapped and constantly observed. The psychological effect of such surveillance is profound. Imagine the mental toll of knowing your every digital footprint is being tracked, analyzed, and potentially used against you. Simple actions most people take for granted, sending a text, checking an email, making a purchase, become fraught with anxiety when performed under constant scrutiny. For Maya, home had transformed from sanctuary to surveillance state. This digital monitoring represented more than just invasion of privacy. It was a form of psychological abuse designed to maintain control through fear and intimidation. By creating an environment where Maya felt constantly watched, Larry effectively established himself as the omnipresent authority in her life, a position that became increasingly threatened as she planned her escape. The sophistication of this monitoring suggests premeditation and deliberate strategy rather than momentary jealousy. Larry wasn't simply checking Maya's phone when she left it unattended. He had established systematic access to multiple communication channels and financial records. This level of surveillance requires sustained effort and technological knowledge, indicating the depths of his determination to maintain control. The transformation in Larry's behavior didn't happen overnight. Like most controlling relationships, the progression was gradual enough that each escalation could be rationalized or normalized until the situation became untenable. Maya had spent 2 decades with Larry, building a life and family together. The psychological complexity of recognizing abuse in a long-term relationship often delays victims from taking action until the situation reaches critical levels. By December 2020, Maya had reached her breaking point. The signs were unmistakable to those who understood domestic abuse patterns. Her growing isolation, Larry's increasing desperation, the systematic surveillance, and the shift from private to public marital troubles. The warning lights weren't just flashing, they were blaring an urgent alarm about what might come next. As the warning signs of abuse blared louder, Larry's tactics took an unexpected turn from the technological to the mystical. When digital surveillance failed to maintain his grip on Maya's mind and heart, he ventured into territory few would expect in a modern marriage dispute: the supernatural. Behind the jealous outbursts and monitoring lay a shadow world of spellcasters, psychics, and subliminal manipulation that revealed just how far a desperate man would go when his control began slipping away. Investigators would later uncover a disturbing digital trail showing Larry's descent into increasingly bizarre methods to salvage his crumbling marriage. As Maya's resolve to leave strengthened, Larry began reaching out to spellcasters, online practitioners who claimed they could cast hexes or influence others through supernatural means. These weren't casual inquiries. They were desperate pleas from a man watching his control over his wife evaporate. The emails Larry sent to these supernatural services painted a troubling psychological portrait. Initially, his requests seemed born of desperation, but remained focused on reconciliation, attempting to rekindle Maya's feelings for him through mystical intervention. But as Maya's determination to leave became clearer, investigators noted a chilling evolution in Larry's requests. His appeals to these spellcasters gradually transformed from seeking reconciliation to something far more sinister. He started asking these spellcasters to make Maya hurt, to make her have an accident, one investigator noted. The logic behind this disturbing shift revealed Larry's twisted mentality. If Maya became injured or physically dependent on him, she wouldn't be able to leave. This progression from wanting to repair the relationship to wishing bodily harm upon his wife demonstrated how Larry's desperation had curdled into something darker as his grasp on Maya weakened. The frequency and urgency of these emails accelerated as Maya moved closer to leaving. What began as occasional messages became a flood of increasingly frantic communications. Each time Maya took another step toward independence, Larry fired off more desperate appeals to these supernatural practitioners. The timestamps on these messages often coincided with significant moments in their deteriorating relationship. A digital diary tracking Larry's mounting panic as Maya slipped further from his control. But Larry's supernatural solutions weren't limited to external practitioners. His internet search history revealed attempts to find ways to influence Maya's thinking directly. Among the most disturbing discoveries on Larry's devices were searches for subliminal wife training techniques, methods purportedly designed to subconsciously influence another person's thoughts and emotions without their knowledge or consent. These weren't just idle searches. Maya made a startling discovery that brought Larry's manipulation attempts from the digital world into their physical home. Hidden beneath their bed, she found a cell phone playing what initially sounded like white noise. This seemingly innocuous device had a much more disturbing purpose, as later testimony would reveal. When confronted about this strange discovery, Larry made a surprising admission to his sister-in-law. He explained that the recordings contained hidden messages embedded within the white noise. Phrases like, "I love you" or "love me," played at a level that would supposedly bypass Maya's conscious awareness and implant these thoughts directly into her subconscious mind. He thought these subliminal messages would make her fall back in love with him. Larry's sister-in-law later testified, describing how Larry believed these recordings could rewire Maya's feelings without her knowledge. This attempt to literally program his wife's emotions without her consent represented a profound violation, not just of her privacy, but of her very autonomy over her own thoughts and feelings. The discovery of the hidden phone playing subliminal messages was particularly chilling because it demonstrated that Larry's attempts at control had moved beyond mere surveillance. He wasn't just monitoring Maya's communications. He was actively trying to manipulate her mind. The boundary between watching and controlling had been obliterated in Larry's desperate bid to maintain his marriage. For Maya, finding this device must have been a moment of profound clarity. Concrete evidence that the person sharing her bed was willing to go to extraordinary lengths to maintain control over her. The psychological impact of discovering such manipulation would be devastating for anyone, but especially for someone already navigating the complex emotional terrain of leaving an abusive relationship. Larry's descent into supernatural solutions mirrored a pattern often seen in abusive relationships when traditional control tactics begin to fail. As Maya started asserting her independence and making concrete plans to leave, Larry's methods became increasingly desperate and bizarre. The progression from jealousy to surveillance to supernatural manipulation showed a man spiraling as his control slipped away. What makes this aspect of the case particularly disturbing is how it reveals the underlying psychology of control. Larry didn't just want Maya's physical presence in the marriage. He wanted possession of her mind, her emotions, and her will. The subliminal messages and spell-casting requests demonstrate that he viewed Maya not as an autonomous person with her own desires and needs, but as something to be programmed and controlled. This dehumanization is a hallmark of abusive relationships, where the abuser increasingly views their partner as an object rather than a person. The supernatural elements of Larry's control campaign also highlight the lengths to which abusers will go when conventional methods fail. When monitoring Maya's communications didn't keep her from wanting to leave, he sought increasingly exotic solutions, a desperate scramble to maintain control by any means necessary. In this context, the spell-casting and subliminal messaging weren't bizarre aberrations, but logical extensions of his need for dominance. As investigators pieced together the timeline of events leading up to Maya's disappearance, they noted that Larry's supernatural solutions began giving way to more concrete actions as Maya's steps toward leaving became more definitive. The shift from mystical attempts at control to more tangible measures mirrored his growing realization that Maya was serious about ending their marriage. This transition would prove to be a critical turning point in the case, one that would have devastating consequences. The line between mystical manipulation and deadly action can sometimes be crossed in a single moment. On January 7, 2021, Maya Milite made a phone call that would finally transform her private fears into public record. A call to a divorce attorney that became the last documented act of her life. Despite Larry's increasingly elaborate tactics to maintain control, Maya had reached her breaking point. The subliminal messages hidden beneath her bed, the spellcasters hired to manipulate her feelings, and the constant digital surveillance had only strengthened her resolve. By early January, she was no longer wavering about her decision to leave. That Thursday morning, Maya picked up the phone and dialed Broaden Law Office in Chula Vista. On the other end was Destiny Johnson, a staff member who would later provide crucial testimony about their conversation. For several minutes, Maya outlined her situation, her voice betraying the fear she carried about taking this irreversible step. She was terrified about what Larry might do if he found out she was filing for divorce. Johnson would later testify, describing the palpable anxiety in Maya's voice. This wasn't the typical nervousness of someone ending a marriage. It was the fear of someone who genuinely believed their safety was at risk. The call represented Maya's final step toward freedom, scheduling a consultation that would never come to pass. After months of contemplating divorce, she had finally acted on her decision, transforming private thoughts into concrete action. The digital trail of this call would later become central to the investigation timeline, marking both her courage and the moment that potentially sealed her fate. Maya's newfound determination wasn't limited to legal consultations. That same day, she directly confronted Larry with unmistakable clarity about her intentions, sending him a text message that left no room for misinterpretation. "I don't want to be your wife anymore. I'm filing whether you like it or not. I should have left a long time ago, and this time I'm not going to look back and say that again." These weren't words of negotiation or an invitation to work things out. They were a declaration of independence from a woman who had made her final decision after years of escalating control. The forceful language, particularly "whether you like it or not," signaled to Larry that his supernatural solutions, monitoring tactics and manipulation attempts had failed. Maya was leaving, and nothing would change her mind. This wasn't a sudden decision for Maya, but the culmination of months of careful preparation. While Larry had been busy contacting spellcasters, Maya had been building a support network and safety plan. Close friends had become confidants in her struggle, offering not just emotional support but practical solutions for her escape. One friend, recognizing the danger inherent in Maya's situation, had even offered her a condo safe house, a secure location where she and the children could stay while navigating the divorce proceedings. This offer highlighted something profound about Maya's circumstances. Even her friends recognized that simply filing for divorce might put her in immediate physical danger, necessitating emergency shelter options. The reality of abusive relationships often follows a predictable pattern that domestic violence experts have documented for decades. The most dangerous moment for a victim isn't during arguments or even during physical abuse. It's when they attempt to leave. This is when control is threatened most directly, when the abuser faces the ultimate rejection of their authority, and when violence often escalates from control to homicide. Maya seemed to understand this pattern all too well. In conversations with friends that would later become evidence, she had articulated her fears with chilling prescience. "If something happened to me," she told them plainly, "it's gonna be Larry." These weren't the words of someone being dramatic or seeking attention. They were the clear-eyed assessment of a woman who understood exactly how dangerous her situation had become. This warning, shared with multiple friends, reveals Maya's acute awareness of her vulnerability. She wasn't naive about the risks she faced in seeking divorce, but had reached the point where continuing in the marriage seemed more dangerous than leaving it. The warning also demonstrates how isolated victims of controlling relationships often become, able to confide their fears to friends, but still trapped in situations where those fears become reality despite everyone's best efforts. January 7th marked not just Maya's decisive steps toward divorce, but the convergence of two opposing forces, her determination to escape and Larry's desperate need to maintain control. The day progressed, Maya continued with her normal activities, likely unaware that the hours were counting down on her life. She was last seen at approximately 5 p.m. at the family home, the final confirmed sighting of a woman whose disappearance would soon trigger a massive search and eventually a murder investigation. The timing creates a haunting sequence. Maya calls a divorce attorney, sends a definitive text to Larry declaring her intention to leave, and then vanishes. This progression suggests not coincidence, but causation, that the very act of asserting her independence triggered the final, irreversible response from her controlling husband. In the psychology of domestic control, this pattern appears repeatedly when surveillance fails. When manipulation fails, when supernatural methods fail, the controller faces a fundamental choice: accept the loss of control or escalate to prevent it at any cost. For controlling individuals, the prospect of their target successfully escaping their influence can trigger catastrophic reactions, a phenomenon domestic violence researchers call separation assault. What followed Maya's phone call to the divorce attorney remains the central mystery of her disappearance. The evening of January 7th would feature unexplained sounds captured on neighbors' security systems, unusual activities at the Milite home, and the beginning of Larry's suspicious behaviors that would later lead investigators to name him as the prime suspect. The coincidence is too stark to ignore. The very day Maya took her most definitive step toward freedom became the day she disappeared forever. Her call to the attorney represented both her greatest act of courage and potentially the catalyst for her demise, the moment when Larry realized that all his previous efforts to maintain control had failed, and more drastic measures might be his only remaining option. Option 3's haunting imagery of security cameras as unwitting witnesses provides the most compelling hook for this section. Let me enhance it for an even more effective opening. Those silent electronic sentinels, neighborhood security cameras, captured what might have been Maya Milite's final moments on Earth, not through their lenses, but through their microphones. As darkness settled over the quiet Chula Vista neighborhood on January 7th, 2021, the camera's audio sensors detected something disturbing: 8 distinct sharp bangs piercing the night air at approximately 8:30 p.m. Sound waves traveling through the cold January night, initially unremarkable until investigators would later describe them as consistent with gunshots. The timing couldn't be more significant. Just hours earlier, Maya had made that fateful call to a divorce attorney, to her last documented act. By 5 p.m., she was seen alive at the family home. But what happened after sundown would transform this from a missing persons case into something far more sinister. These 8 loud bangs near the Milite residence weren't isolated in their strangeness. The night held another acoustic anomaly that raised investigators' eyebrows. Around 10 p.m., a full hour and a half after those gunshot-like sounds, the same security system captured the voices and laughter of the Milite children playing in their backyard. The contrast is jarring. In one moment, potential gunfire. In another, children at play. But the timing made this innocent activity deeply suspicious. Neighbors found it profoundly unusual for children to be outside at that hour, especially on a cold January night. More troubling still was the fact that by this point, their mother had been missing for several hours, though no one outside the home yet knew it. What child plays outside at 10 p.m. on a school night in January? What parent allows such behavior? The questions multiplied as investigators pieced together the timeline. If Maya was already gone by this point, why were the children outside rather than inside wondering where their mother was? If she wasn't gone, why wasn't she enforcing normal bedtime routines? The acoustic evidence from that night created a disturbing narrative when paired with video surveillance footage from the neighborhood. This crucial visual evidence was never released to the public, however, due to privacy concerns from the neighbor who provided it. The combination of what was heard and what was seen painted a picture too disturbing to ignore. Law enforcement experts analyzed the 8 loud bangs, evaluating their acoustic signature, timing, and pattern. The conclusion was unmistakable. These sounds matched the profile of gunshots. Not fireworks, not a car backfiring, not construction noise, gunshots. In a quiet neighborhood where such sounds should never be heard. The children's outdoor play session raised equally troubling questions. Was this an attempt at establishing normalcy after something horrific had occurred? Was someone trying to create the impression of an ordinary family evening while something far from ordinary had just transpired? Or was it simply an unusual parenting decision made during a moment of crisis? These questions became even more pointed when investigators considered them alongside the absence of any noise or activity from Maya herself after 5 p.m. The security recordings captured no indication that she left the house willingly. No car starting, no doors opening and closing, no voices in conversation, just those 8 loud bangs at 8:30 p.m., followed by children playing outside at an inappropriate hour. The timeline emerging from these recordings suggested a sequence of events too coincidental to dismiss. Maya makes her final call to a divorce attorney. She returns home. Hours pass. 8 loud bangs consistent with gunshots occur near her residence. Later, her children are mysteriously playing outside at 10 p.m. in cold weather. The next day, she's nowhere to be found, while her personal belongings remain untouched in the home. For investigators, these security recordings became the acoustic breadcrumbs leading toward a devastating conclusion. The 8 loud bangs weren't just random neighborhood noise. They potentially captured the exact moment Maya's life ended, sound waves preserving what may have been her final seconds. The children's voices later that night took on an even more haunting quality. When viewed through this lens, innocent play, occurring in the shadow of tragedy. The neighbor who provided these recordings had installed the security system for routine protection, never imagining it would capture evidence in a potential homicide. The system wasn't pointed directly at the Milite home. It wasn't designed to monitor that property. Yet in its passive surveillance of the neighborhood's soundscape, it may have documented the critical moments of Maya's disappearance. Investigators carefully synchronized these audio recordings with other evidence they were gathering. The timing of the 8 bangs aligned with gaps in cell phone activity and other digital footprints. The children's outdoor play session corresponded with a period when, according to later testimony, Larry claimed Maya was simply taking some time alone in their bedroom, the same bedroom that would be found empty 2 days later. The security camera evidence formed part of a larger acoustic map of that January evening. Other neighbors reported hearing unusual sounds around the same time, though none had recording devices as sophisticated as the primary source. These collective auditory witnesses helped establish not just what happened, but when it happened, creating a timeline that would become crucial to the case. As investigators pieced together the events of January 7th, the security camera recordings became the backbone of their chronology. Before these recordings, Maya alive and taking steps toward divorce. After these recordings, Maya gone without a trace, her belongings left behind, her children mysteriously playing outside late at night, and her husband providing inconsistent explanations about her whereabouts. The transformation of ordinary home security footage into critical evidence in a potential murder case underscores how modern technology often captures truth in unexpected ways. These devices, installed to watch for package thieves or vandals, instead became silent witnesses to what investigators would come to believe was the violent end of a young mother's life. The electronic ears heard what human witnesses did not minus, the sounds of a family being irrevocably shattered. While those electronic ears documented the acoustic evidence of January 7th, the visual chronicle of suspicious behavior was just beginning to unfold. As the morning light broke on January 8th, neighborhood surveillance cameras captured something that investigators would later flag as deeply troubling. Larry Milete carefully maneuvering his black Lexus GX 460 in the family driveway. But this wasn't just any parking job. Larry deliberately positioned the vehicle so that its rear compartment, the trunk, remained completely hidden from the watching electronic eyes that dotted the neighborhood. This calculated repositioning of the family vehicle came mere hours after those 8 loud bangs had echoed through the night. The timing alone raised questions, but it was what happened next that truly set alarm bells ringing for investigators. After strategically placing his car out of camera view, Larry Milete embarked on what would become an unexplained 11-hour and 21-minute absence from the family home. Perhaps most telling about this extended disappearance was what Larry chose to leave behind: his cell phone. In an era where smartphones function as extensions of ourselves, digital appendages we rarely part with, Larry made the conscious decision to travel without his primary means of communication. This wasn't a quick trip to the grocery store or a brief errand. This was nearly half a day spent completely off the grid, unreachable, during the critical period when his wife was supposedly just taking some time alone. When later questioned about this extended absence, Larry's explanations began to shift and contradict one another. Initially, he claimed to have driven to Solana Beach with one of their children on January 8th. A reasonable alibi on its surface, a father spending time with his child at a scenic coastal location. Yet when speaking to a neighbor about the same day, Larry offered an entirely different story, stating he had actually gone to Anza Borrego Desert State Park. These locations lie in opposite directions from the Milite home, with vastly different terrains and driving distances. Anza Borrego Desert State Park spans more than 600,000 acres of rugged desert landscape, featuring remote, isolated areas accessible by four-wheel drive vehicles like Larry's Lexus SUV. Its vast, unpopulated expanses make it an ideal location for someone seeking privacy, or perhaps a place to dispose of evidence far from prying eyes. The park's numerous canyons, ravines, and desert plains could easily conceal something or someone that a person wished to hide. The timing of Larry's desert excursion carried another troubling dimension. His 11-hour absence conveniently coincided with the first time Maya's increasingly worried family members came to check on her. While they were arriving at the Milite home with growing concern about Maya's unusual silence, her husband was nowhere to be found. This curious synchronicity raised the question: was Larry's extended trip deliberately timed to avoid facing the scrutiny of his in-laws, who might ask uncomfortable questions about his wife's whereabouts? Upon returning home after this mysterious day-long journey, Larry took another action that would later fuel investigators' suspicions. He approached a neighbor with an unusual request: would they help detail the Lexus? This sudden concern with cleaning the vehicle, occurring immediately after his extended desert trip and coinciding with his wife's unexplained absence, struck investigators as potentially significant. Was Larry attempting to eliminate trace evidence that might have been picked up during his desert excursion? The behaviors displayed by Larry in the immediate aftermath of Maya's disappearance followed a pattern familiar to experienced investigators. In cases where foul play is suspected, the hours and days following a victim's disappearance often reveal telling actions by perpetrators, attempts to establish alibis, dispose of evidence, clean potential crime scenes, or create misleading narratives. Larry's careful repositioning of the Lexus, his extended absence without his phone, his contradictory explanations, and his request to have the vehicle cleaned all fit within this troubling pattern. Recognizing the potential significance of the Milite vehicles in unraveling Maya's disappearance, investigators later made a critical decision. Both the black Lexus GX 460 and another family vehicle, a black Jeep, were impounded by law enforcement as part of the expanding investigation. These vehicles potentially contained crucial forensic evidence, trace evidence that might reveal where they had traveled or what they might have transported in the critical hours following those 8 loud bangs captured on neighborhood surveillance. The Lexus, in particular, became a focal point for investigators. They confirmed, through multiple sources of evidence, that this was indeed the vehicle Larry used during his absence on January 8th. The SUV's spacious interior, including its cargo area, could potentially have accommodated substantial items or even a human body. Its four-wheel drive capabilities made it suitable for traversing the rough terrain of places like Anza Borrego Desert State Park, where numerous remote locations exist far from hiking trails or park roads. In the hands of forensic experts, vehicles often reveal secrets their owners wish to keep hidden. Even thorough cleaning can't eliminate all traces of biological evidence, soil samples, plant material, or other microscopic evidence that can place a vehicle at a specific location or implicate it in transporting specific items. The impounding of both military vehicles suggested investigators were pursuing exactly these kinds of forensic leads. The timeline of Larry's movements on January 8th, starting with the repositioning of the Lexus outside camera view, continuing through his 11-hour absence without his phone, and culminating in his request to have the vehicle detailed, painted a picture of someone potentially engaged in evidence disposal. Combined with his contradictory statements about his whereabouts that day, investigators began building a case that suggested Larry may have been attempting to eliminate evidence tied to Maya's disappearance, possibly including her body. As the investigation progressed, this suspicious 11-hour window on January 8th became increasingly central to the case against Larry Millay. While the world was just beginning to notice Maya's absence, it appeared her husband might have already been taking calculated steps to ensure she would never be found. The electronic eyes that had captured the sounds of the previous night had now documented a day of suspicious movements that seemed designed to cover tracks and establish misleading narratives. For investigators, Larry's behavior on January 8th represented more than just unusual actions. It suggested consciousness of guilt. Innocent people with missing spouses typically spend every moment searching for them, contacting friends and family, or cooperating with authorities. They don't vanish for 11 hours without their phones, offer contradictory stories about their whereabouts, or suddenly become concerned with cleaning vehicles. Each of these behaviors, while potentially innocent in isolation, formed a damning pattern when viewed collectively. Those damning patterns of Larry's behavior presented investigators with a profound challenge that haunts many murder investigations. How do you prove someone killed a person when you can't find a body? The transformation of Maya's case from a desperate search into a murder investigation hinged on the meticulous work of detectives who assembled a mosaic of evidence so compelling that it eventually made Maya's physical absence irrelevant to the charges against her husband. In the early days following Maya's disappearance report, Larry maintained a cooperative facade with authorities. He participated in interviews and allowed initial searches of the family home. This veneer of cooperation cracked on February 3, 2021, when he abruptly ceased all communication with investigators after hiring an attorney. This sudden shift raised red flags among detectives, who recognized it as a common pattern when suspects realize the investigation is focusing on them. Behind the scenes, the Chula Vista Police Department was coordinating one of the most intensive missing persons investigations in the department's history. Their methodical approach expanded far beyond routine procedures. By the time they were ready to make an arrest, investigators had executed a staggering 67 search warrants and conducted 87 interviews, creating a comprehensive picture of the events surrounding Maya's disappearance. The investigation's first major breakthrough came on January 23, 2021, when police secured a warrant to thoroughly search the Milite home. What began as a single search warrant soon multiplied as investigators discovered troubling connections that led them to additional locations, including the homes of Larry's family members. During these searches, authorities seized firearms and gathered other crucial evidence that would later strengthen their case. As investigators dug deeper into Larry's digital footprint, they unearthed something truly disturbing. On April 6, 2021, reports emerged that Larry had allegedly sought to hire someone to kill the man he suspected Maya was having an affair with. This revelation exposed not just a potential motive, but a mindset capable of contemplating murder. The fact that Larry had allegedly explored having someone else killed made the possibility that he had harmed Maya seem much more plausible to investigators. This discovery had profound implications for the direction of the investigation. No longer were detectives simply dealing with a suspicious disappearance. They were now examining what appeared to be a calculated act motivated by jealousy and rage. The man who had once portrayed himself as a concerned husband was now revealed to have allegedly explored murder-for-hire options. Concerns about Larry's stability and the safety of the Milite children escalated in May 2021 when authorities secured a gun violence restraining order against him. This legal action wasn't primarily focused on Maya's disappearance, but on an immediate safety issue. Larry's children reportedly knew the passcode to his gun safe, creating a dangerous situation in an already volatile home environment. The court agreed, and authorities seized Larry's remaining firearms. The restraining order was later extended in September 2021, reflecting ongoing concerns about the children's safety. By late July 2021, the accumulation of evidence led the Chula Vista Police Department to formally name Larry as a person of interest in Maya's disappearance. This public designation signaled that the investigation had moved beyond considering multiple possibilities and was now firmly focused on Larry as the prime suspect. For investigators, the puzzle pieces were fitting together to form a disturbing picture. While detectives built their case, volunteer search efforts continued across Southern California's varied terrain. The community's determination to find Maya never wavered as search parties combed through Mount San Miguel Park, navigated the challenging Glamis sand dunes, explored the shores of Lower Otay Lake, and even ventured to the remote Salton Sea. Each location represented a possible site where Maya's remains might be hidden, expansive areas where a body could be concealed from discovery. These volunteer searches reflected both the community's commitment to finding Maya and the significant challenge facing prosecutors: how to prepare a murder case without the victim's body. The searches continued even as the legal case against Larry grew stronger, with volunteers hoping to provide Maya's family with closure and strengthen the prosecution's case. The culmination of these investigative efforts came on October 19, 2021, when Larry Milite was arrested and charged with the murder of Maya. During the press conference announcing the arrest, San Diego County District Attorney Summer Stephan laid out the prosecution's theory. Investigators believed Larry murdered Maya on January 7th and disposed of her body during his unexplained 11-hour absence on January 8th. The arrest marked a significant milestone in what had become known as a no-body homicide, a case where prosecutors must convince a jury of the defendant's guilt without the physical presence of the victim. Such cases present unique challenges but are not unprecedented. Prosecutors must rely on circumstantial evidence, establishing patterns of behavior, motive, opportunity, and the absence of any reasonable explanation for the victim's disappearance. In Larry's case, this evidence included his suspicious actions on January 8th, his contradictory accounts of his whereabouts, the timing of Maya's call to a divorce attorney on January 7th, the suspicious sounds captured on security recordings that evening, and his alleged attempts to have someone else killed. Collectively, these elements created a compelling narrative of what prosecutors believe happened to Maya Millay. The charges against Larry were serious and specific: first-degree murder and illegal possession of an assault weapon. The inclusion of the weapons charge highlighted the investigation's thoroughness, as detectives had uncovered illegal firearms during their searches of the Millay home. But the murder charge remained the central focus, a statement that authorities believed they had sufficient evidence to secure a conviction despite never finding Maya's body. For investigators, the case represented both a professional achievement and a somber reminder of the human tragedy at its center. Despite the technical challenges of a no-body homicide prosecution, they had assembled evidence they believed would stand up in court. For Maya's family, the arrest provided a measure of validation for their suspicions and a step toward justice, even as they continued to hope for the discovery of Maya's remains. An arrest is just the first step in a criminal case, but few could have predicted the twisted journey through the courts that followed Larry Millay's charging. 4 years after Maya vanished without a trace, her family found themselves trapped in a different kind of disappearance, the vanishing of time as justice remained perpetually just out of reach. The criminal justice system, designed to methodically pursue truth, often moves at a pace that feels torturous to those seeking closure. When Larry Millay stood before a judge on October 21, 2021, just days after his arrest, he offered a plea of not guilty to the charges of first-degree murder and illegal possession of a weapon. For Maya's family, who had spent months searching for her and advocating for investigation, that plea marked the beginning of what would become an agonizing legal marathon. The court's initial actions seemed to validate the gravity of the charges. During a November 4th bail hearing, the judge cited Larry's past threats against Maya's suspected lover as grounds to deny his release, effectively ensuring he would remain behind bars throughout the proceedings. For a moment, it appeared the case would progress with the momentum that had built during the investigation. But the legal path soon twisted in unexpected directions. By June 2022, less than a year after his arrest, Larry's defense attorney threw the proceedings into disarray by declaring doubt about his client's mental competency to stand trial. This single legal maneuver brought the criminal process to an immediate halt, freezing the case in place while the court evaluated Larry's mental state. The suspension of proceedings left Maya's family in limbo, unable to move forward toward resolution, yet unable to set aside their grief to heal. Each day of delay meant another day without answers about Maya's fate, another day without putting her memory properly to rest. Mental competency evaluations, designed to protect defendants' rights, inadvertently prolonged the family's suffering. 3 months later, in September 2022, Judge Cindy Davis evaluated the psychiatric reports and ruled that Larry was indeed mentally competent to stand trial. With this obstacle cleared, Maya's family hoped momentum would build toward a resolution. The criminal proceedings resumed their methodical march forward, though at a pace that felt glacial to those waiting for answers. January 2023 brought the preliminary hearing, a crucial step where prosecutors must demonstrate sufficient evidence to justify a trial. Over multiple days, 25 witnesses testified about the deteriorating marriage between Maya and Larry, painting a vivid picture of escalating control and desperation. Family members, friends, and colleagues recounted warning signs they had observed in the months before Maya's disappearance, creating a narrative of a marriage that had become dangerously unstable. The preliminary hearing culminated on January 25, 2023, when Judge Dwayne Mooring delivered a significant ruling. There was enough evidence for Larry Millay to stand trial for murder, despite the absence of Maya's body. The judge specifically noted the marked contrast in Larry's behavior before and after Maya's disappearance as compelling evidence supporting the prosecution's theory. This ruling represented a pivotal victory for the prosecution in a case where the victim's remains had never been found. With the case cleared for trial, Maya's family might have expected proceedings to accelerate. Instead, legal maneuvering introduced new delays. The most devastating came in September 2024, when the judge agreed to push the start of Larry's trial to July 7, 2025, a full 4.5 years after Maya's disappearance. The delay came at the request of Larry's attorney, who cited financial hardship as a barrier to adequate preparation. For Maya's family, this postponement represented yet another year of waiting, another year without closure. While the criminal case moved through its slow progression, another legal battle unfolded simultaneously: the fight for custody of the 3 Millay children. Initially placed with Larry's parents after his arrest, the children became the center of a contentious struggle between the two sides of the family. The court, recognizing the uniquely challenging circumstances, appointed a guardian ad litem to represent the children's interests in the midst of this family fracture. The custody proceedings revealed troubling behavior by Larry, even from behind bars. Despite court orders restricting his communication, he managed to make over 100 phone calls to his children from jail, speaking with them for more than 9 hours in total. This violation of a restraining order led to further restrictions on his ability to contact the children, reflecting the court's concern about his influence over them during this vulnerable time. The visitation arrangements established by the court attempted to balance competing priorities, maintaining the children's connection to both sides of their family, while protecting them from the trauma of their father's alleged crime against their mother. Regular visits were arranged between the children and Maya's family, creating brief moments of connection amidst the ongoing legal turmoil. Throughout this period, the children remained caught in an impossible situation, missing a mother who had vanished, separated from a father who stood accused of her murder, and shuttled between extended family members who were themselves processing grief and anger. Every delay in the criminal proceedings extended this uncertain limbo, postponing any possibility of the children finding stability or closure. After years of advocacy by Maya's sister Mara Chris Droye, the custody battle finally reached resolution in August 2024, when the court granted her custody of the children. This ruling represented a significant shift in the children's circumstances, removing them from the household of their father's parents and placing them with the sister of their missing mother. While this decision provided some resolution to one aspect of the family's legal struggles, the criminal case against Larry remained unresolved, with trial now scheduled for mid-2025. The repeated delays in Larry's trial stemmed from a combination of factors common to complex criminal cases. The defense's questioning of Larry's competency triggered mandatory psychiatric evaluations and hearings. The sheer volume of evidence gathered over months of investigation required extensive review by both prosecution and defense. Financial constraints cited by the defense team necessitated additional time for preparation, and the court's own crowded docket meant that scheduling conflicts pushed proceedings further into the future. For Maya's family, these abstract legal concepts translated into painful reality birthdays, holidays, and anniversaries passing without resolution, without justice, and without Maya. 4 years after her disappearance, they remained suspended in grief, unable to fully process their loss, while the criminal case against Larry remained unresolved. Their pursuit of answers had transformed into an endurance test, requiring them to maintain emotional strength through years of legal proceedings with no clear end in sight. The justice system, designed to be deliberate and thorough, reveals its limitations most painfully in cases like Maya's, where the need for closure collides with the slow machinery of due process. Each postponement, each procedural delay, each rescheduled hearing represented not just changes to a court calendar, but extensions of a family's suffering. Beyond the courtroom battles and legal maneuvers, 3 children lived in the aftermath of their mother's disappearance and father's arrest. While the justice system ground forward at its methodical pace, these silent victims, aged 5, 11, and 12, when their world collapsed, faced questions no child should ever have to contemplate. How do you explain to a child that their father is accused of erasing their mother from existence? Who becomes their caretaker when one parent vanishes and another sits behind bars? The custody battle that unfolded between 2 grieving families would determine not just where these children would live, but who would shape their understanding of what happened to their mother. In the immediate aftermath of Larry's arrest in October 2021, the court made the initial decision to place the Militay children with their paternal grandparents. This arrangement wasn't about taking sides in the criminal case, but rather about minimizing further disruption in young lives already shattered by trauma. By staying in Chula Vista, the children could at least maintain some semblance of normalcy, attending their familiar schools, seeing the same friends, and keeping their daily routines intact, while the adults in their lives grappled with incomprehensible circumstances. Maya's sister, Marie-Chris Droyer, saw things differently. Having already spent months leading search efforts for her missing sister, she quickly filed a petition for guardianship, hoping to bring the children to live with her family in Moreno Valley. This marked the beginning of a custody battle that would stretch across 3 painful years, playing out in family court, while the criminal case against their father proceeded at an agonizingly slow pace in criminal court. The family court recognized the complexity of the situation and took steps to ensure the children's voices wouldn't be lost amid the competing claims of grieving adults. Kelly James was appointed as guardian ad litem, a special advocate responsible for representing the children's best interests in court proceedings. This third-party professional became their voice in a legal system designed for adults, tasked with learning what the children wanted and needed during this impossible transition. Understanding the psychological impact of such profound trauma required professional intervention. The 3 siblings underwent forensic interviews at Rady Children's Hospital's Chadwick Center, a specialized facility equipped to assess children who have experienced trauma. These sessions weren't just about gathering information. They represented the beginning of a long healing journey for children forced to process emotions most adults would struggle to manage. The court crafted visitation arrangements that allowed Maya's family regular time with the children while they remained in the paternal grandparents' custody. These schedules evolved over time, adapting to the changing needs of growing children, navigating grief alongside normal developmental challenges. For Maya's parents and siblings, these visits became precious connections to the only remaining part of Maya still present in their lives, her children, who carried echoes of her in their smiles, mannerisms, and personalities. From behind bars, Larry attempted to maintain his relationship with his children despite court restrictions limiting his contact. The court discovered he had made over 100 phone calls to them from jail, speaking with them for more than 9 hours total. These violations of protective orders led to further restrictions, with the judge eventually limiting his communication to written letters only. The inappropriate calls highlighted the difficult balance between a father's desire to maintain a relationship with his children and protecting young minds from potentially harmful conversations about their mother's case. Throughout this prolonged custody battle, therapy became a crucial lifeline for the Milite children. Professional counselors worked to help them process their complicated emotions: grief for a mother who disappeared without saying goodbye, confusion about a father they loved, who stood accused of the unthinkable, and uncertainty about their own futures. These therapy sessions created safe spaces where the children could express feelings too complex and painful to articulate in everyday life. The adults fighting over custody understood one fundamental truth: regardless of who gained legal guardianship, these children had experienced a trauma that would shape the rest of their lives. Every birthday without their mother, every Father's Day with their dad behind bars, every school performance without either parent in attendance, each milestone carried the weight of their family's tragedy. In August 2024, after 3 years of legal battles running parallel to the criminal case against Larry, the family court reached a decision. Marie-Christine, who had never stopped fighting to bring her sister's children into her home, was granted custody. This ruling represented more than just a change of address for the 3 siblings. It marked the court's recognition that their long-term stability and healing would best be served in the care of their maternal aunt. The custody transfer came just as Larry's trial faced yet another postponement to July 2025. By then, the youngest child would be 9 years old, having spent nearly half their life without their mother and with their father incarcerated. The oldest would be entering their mid-teens, having navigated the most formative years of childhood against the backdrop of an ongoing murder investigation involving both parents. For these children, the consequences of domestic violence extended far beyond the immediate crime. Every developmental milestone occurred in the shadow of trauma. First days of school, sports achievements, birthday celebrations, moments typically commemorated with family photos and shared joy, instead carried the weight of absence. Their childhoods weren't just altered, they were fundamentally redefined by events they had no part in creating, but must nonetheless carry forever. Child psychologists who work with families affected by domestic homicide note that children in these situations face unique challenges. Beyond their grief, they must reconcile loving both the parent who is gone and the parent accused of causing that absence. They must form identities separate from the crime that has defined their family in the public eye. And they must somehow move forward despite unanswered questions that may never be fully resolved. The custody decision, while significant, represented just one step in their journey. As they settled into life with their aunt in Moreno Valley, the children faced new adjustments, new schools, new friends, new routines. Yet this transition also offered possibilities. A chance to build lives somewhat removed from the epicenter of their family tragedy, in a home where their mother's memory could be honored without the constant shadow of the criminal proceedings against their father. Behind the headlines and court proceedings, Maya's story has created ripples of grief that continue to wash over her children every day. The emotional toll of her disappearance hangs like a shadow over these young lives as they navigate a world where neither parent remains present, one vanished, the other imprisoned. Their struggle for normalcy represents the hidden cost of domestic violence that extends far beyond the immediate victim. Maya's family members have transformed their pain into purpose, organizing countless searches across San Diego County's vast terrain, while simultaneously fighting for custody of her children. Their persistence speaks to the impossible burden of seeking closure when a loved one's remains are still missing, forcing them to exist in an agonizing limbo where grief cannot fully resolve. For these children, growing up amid this unresolved tragedy means facing questions without answers, birthdays without their mother, and the painful knowledge that the final chapter of her story remains unwritten. As they mature through these formative years with this weight on their small shoulders, the true measure of justice becomes not just legal verdicts, but whether these children can somehow find healing despite the trauma that has redefined their childhoods.